very much appreciated. I know you're busy. Thanks for the beers as well, my friend.
My pleasure, Jas. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. So Cam, our podcast goes out to entrepreneurs, real estate people, and essentially anyone who's looking into getting more thoughts from leaders on leadership. We're obviously sitting in your new brewery here at Von Bugle in Etobicoke. I definitely want our listeners to hear about the story there. But if you don't mind, take us back a little to the times of how Steam Whistle started and how you actually, even before we get into that, how you got into business.
Well, I guess we could wind it way back to 1986. My dad had started a brewery called Upper Canada Brewing in 1985. And he's sort of a man of old school fathership. So my two brothers and my sister, we were all put to work in the summers in grade 7. And then each summer.
And was this at the brewery?
This is at the brewery, yeah. We've done a number of different things over the years, from load bottles into machines to do inventory.
Did you like that stuff at that age?
Loved it.
Okay.
I mean, in hindsight, the unique advantage is we got exposed to, and myself specifically, got exposed to many different areas of the operation. So fast forward to today, it's very helpful to understand more than just a singular area of a business when you're leading it. Anyway, going through that, we had a wonderful time at Upper Canada. I met my future partner for Steam Whistle, Greg Taylor, there.
Working there?
Yeah. He had joined the organization and we had become buddies. And in the mid-90s, through a long series of events, I won't take you through it now, the brewery was acquired by Sleeman Breweries. And just before that, or around that time, myself and my buddies Greg Taylor and Greg Cromwell, we all got fired. So
once the takeover happened,
it was sort of, there was another group just before that. Anyway, things were very successful at the time, so a lot of people wanted to come in and had some different intentions. So anyway, we got kicked out of the industry, essentially, and for 2 years we each did something else. And then on a canoe trip that my dad still held annually even after the brewery was gone, all the former staff got together on an annual canoe trip. Anyway, it was on one of those canoe trips that Greg and I were sitting late at night, and most were in bed, and we said,
having a couple of beers,
having many beers, and decided, man, we've got to get back into the beer industry. So that next week we essentially quit our jobs and started writing the business plan for Three Fired Guys Brewing.
Three Fired Guys. Yeah. I've heard this story.
So we started finding some equipment, putting a plan together. Our objective at the time, there were a lot of European imports that were coming into Canada as consumers started to explore different flavors and getting away from some of the homogeneous offerings provided by the industrial breweries. And we thought, this is crazy. Beer is always best drank in its freshest state. These beers are coming from a quarter away around the world. We should be able to put together a European brewmaster, some great equipment, fly our hops in from Germany, and make a world-class Pilsner right here in Canada that would be fresher and therefore better.
And taste better.
Yeah, and so that was the premise with which we got into it. And that's why when we opened Three Fired Guys Brewing, and it did ultimately become Steam Whistle, because we were on the roof looking for real estate one day, and we could see the downtown core. It was a clear blue sky day, but it was in early winter, and the puffs of the steam exhaust were coming off all the towers, and we thought, man, we got to put a massive steam whistle on the roof of the brewery, and we'll blow it off every day at quitting time, and the whole city will run out and drink our beer. And we just love that whole image of that era of quality craftsmanship, where there were factory whistles and everyone stopped what they were doing and went and had a beer. So we embraced that name and ultimately changed the name to Steam Whistle.
Were you guys thinking of at one point keeping it Three Fired Guys? Or?
Well, we paid homage to the Three Fired Guys lore by embossing on every one of our bottles a little 3FG.
Nice.
And just to so we wouldn't forget our roots.
I love it.
But then this was before we had found the Roundhouse. So we had done an exhaustive building search. We wanted to have a historic, funky, hip, old industrial building in downtown Toronto, and essentially go out and make a community brewery, Canada's community brewery, right in the heart of the core.
And for our listeners who haven't been there, you got to check it out.
You got to check it out. It's a very special building. But at the time, all the office and loft converters were starting to find bricks and exposed beams attractive, and they pay a much higher square footage rate than manufacturing does. So we had ultimately had to throw in the towel on our dream of that building and put an offer in on an industrial building up at York Mills and Don Mills, which was one of the sadder days of our lives because it was such a big part of our dream to have that special building. But we had already bought equipment, we had raised some money. This was a year had gone on now and no progress. We kept losing out on these bids. So my partner Greg at the time called me the next day. He says, "Cam, I'm picking you up. We're just going to drive around and try and find some old building that either is not listed or is derelict, and we can find out who owns it. And we got to keep the dream alive." So he picked me up. We ended up eventually in front of the Roundhouse. At the time, the area was very different than now. We didn't have all the condos, and we didn't have any of that development on Bremner. So it was sort of a bit of a weed patch, but the building obviously was stunning. And it had one of those, those public notice signs out front, the black and white ones, just explaining to the city that something redevelopment is being considered for the building, and for public inquiries, call the number. And so Greg's like, call the number. So I had my first cell phone at the time. This was 1999.
Big brick phone.
And we called the number and got onto the phone with a fellow by the name of Bud Purvis, who was working for a big real estate company, Trizec Con at the time.
Okay.
And they were responsible for doing the RFP, or request for proposal, on behalf of the city to try and find a redevelopment, plan for the building. So this beautiful national historic site wouldn't sit there derelict any longer. They had just, fortunately for us, they had just spent 2 years reviewing various proposals, and nothing that would excite the city council. They had a lot of flea market and casino proposals. And if you know anything about Toronto City Council, you know that that's not going to fly.
Right.
So I think they were happy to hear. Obviously, we had a very strong history at Upper Canada of being not just a brewery, but very heavily involved in the community and art scene and supporting local artists, etc. So that obviously helped the reputation as we got put before city council by Bud and the folks at Trizec Con, and unanimously approved. So we got backed out of the other deal.
Right.
We had a 120-day closing. And some conditions that allowed us to get out of it.
I was going to say, was it easy to get out of that deal? Or?
Yeah, one of the conditions was it had to meet our due diligence to be suitable for brewing operations. Well, there's a lot of variables for that. So we were able to get out of that, and the dream was alive again. And funny enough, that building, the history of that building was it used to repair the steam locomotives that built this fine nation. So kind of fortuitous. We had changed the name to Steam Whistle before then. And on our first tour in the building, we were walking through. It was abandoned, mainly raccoons and a few homeless people that had broken in. We sasaw an Upper Canada lager empty bottle in there. And
no way.
If you know anything about Upper Canada, it's a premium price beer, and you don't necessarily think that the average homeless person living in an abandoned warehouse is indulging in the good stuff. But sure enough, even the former inhabitants of the building had good taste. So
that's awesome.
We knew it was our destiny
to be there.
To be there, yeah.
So between your partners, because I have a partner as well, and we're right now in the process of kind of defining our roles. And if you don't mind, if you can talk about that in terms of partnerships and how that plays out in your
partnerships are very interesting. They're not unlike partnerships or relationships in our private lives. There's good ones and there's bad ones and everything in between, and there's ones that last the test of time and ones that don't. What I found, I was very, very, very fortunate, as was Greg. We had an incredible natural partnership We had different areas of strengths and different styles and different personalities that allowed us to really complement each other. And I think that was a big part of the success, but also we had the same long-term vision as to where we wanted the business to go, but where we wanted the beer to go and the type of culture we wanted to have. So if two people are going the same place long-term, it doesn't matter what comes up, you'll get through it because you're going the same place. Where I find a lot of partnerships fail is if people are going two different places.
Okay.
No matter how hard you try, it will not work long-term because you're trying to go two different places.
I'm sure there's times that you guys butted heads. Maybe
oh
over
yeah,
a few
you know,
years,
a little healthy discourse is I think one of the hallmarks of a good relationship.
That's true.
But respect
yeah.
is key to the underlining of that. So.
Now, in terms of how many employees do you have now in total?
We have about 200 employees coast to coast.
What's your thoughts on leadership? Like, how do you go about it on a daily basis? I mean, 200 employees, that's a lot of people.
I mean, Greg and I's basic fundamental principle, largely learned from my father at Upper Canada, is respect.
Okay.
So we try to treat everybody in the organization with respect and equally, and with the concept that doesn't matter where you are in the hierarchy of an organizational structure, every role is critical to achieving the goals, whether it's a daily goal, a weekly goal, an annual goal, a long-term goal. So we really built a culture around the people, and I think everybody's dream in life, maybe not dream, but in their subconscious, what we all want is to be part of something bigger than just a job description.
So true. And is that a matter of touching some of the employees here and there, like on with meetings and saying, hey, what's some of your goals now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, staff interaction is key. Accessibility to us over the years was key. I mean, we never had offices. It was just an open office concept. We sat amongst the people, and so they knew we were very accessible.
Now, another philosophy that I know Steam Whistle has is do one thing and do it really well. That one thing well. Where did that come from? How did that?
Well, you know, in our past life at the other brewery, we had ended up making, towards the end, about 14 different styles of beer.
Okay.
And two of those had always been about 80% of volume, and one of them was about 60% of volume. So when you realize the amount of distraction, inefficiency, and the weakening of your ability to perfect something when you dilute yourself amongst 14 different products, we said, hey, you know, let's set our sights boldly on the most respected style of beer in the world, which is a traditional European Pilsner, and let's go after some of the oldest breweries in the world, the German and the Czech.
Set your goals high. I love it.
In order to do so, let's focus as much as we can and do just one beer.
So you took that concept of the riches and the niches like to heart. Like
yeah,
you
absolutely.
really. Did you ever, and yourself and Greg, did you guys ever think about maybe losing revenue because you were going just into the niche in that sense?
No, we didn't actually. Maybe that was naivete, but we believed so strongly that we could compete and we could do it with just one beer, and we have, you know, for 18 years been a single brand brewery, which many people in the industry shake their heads at, but we are the #1 independent brewery in the province now, craft beer.
Well, congratulations
with one
on
beer.
that.
So
it's awesome.
And it certainly doesn't hurt the bottom line when you're that streamlined.
Now, have you seen a lot of changes, and if you have, just if you don't mind talking about that, in the brewing business?
Yeah, I mean, I think any industry is in a constant state of change and evolution. Obviously, the most recent wave of the craft beering movement has been very exciting for the industry, because you've got now, we are proud to say as a group of breweries here that we've got over 200 breweries in the province now, and you know, 20 years ago there were 3 or 4. So you know, when you look at that and the excitement that's created amongst consumers and in the industry, I really believe it's benefited the industry as a whole, because it's created a lot of excitement around it.
And why did Von Bugle start? Where did that come from? The name?
Oh, Von Bugle. So Von Bugle is, we have recently built a new brewery here in Etobicoke. And we thought after 18 years, rather than extend the Steam Whistle brand and do a Steam Whistle Ale, Steam Whistle Light, Steam Whistle IPA, Steam Whistle Plaid, Steam Whistle...
Because easily went down that route.
We could have very easily gone down that road,
Yeah.
and I think we can all appreciate we would have seen some very strong short-term sales. But in the long run, when you start diluting a brand like that, in the long run, I believe you hurt the brand's equity. So we decided, rather than do that, let's build a new brewery, and let's pick one more style. Also,
hang on one second.
Rooted.
Just before you continue that, I just want to get into your head for a second, where you said you were maybe thinking about doing the lights and still, and then you just say, let's start a new brewery.
That's right.
Some people have a hard time just jumping over the fence, and I know you have the experience, but what does it take to do that? It's a big jump.
I mean, we're very dedicated to the not just the quality, but the spirituality of a beer, and I think a beer deserves its own brewery, and a brewery deserves its own beer. So that's why we decided to create a new one. And in looking on what to create, largely consumers segment the beer industry into two categories, whether it's in their conscious and they acknowledge it, or whether it's in their subconscious and they're not aware of it. We largely segment the industry into the golden pale colored beers, which Steam Whistle would, as a Pilsner, would be one, and the darker colored beers, anything from amber all the way to very dark, like a stout.
Definitely, that's how I describe the two.
And if you talk to many of the retailers, they'll say consumers, when they walk into a store, they usually know which of those two groups they're going to walk out of the store with, but they don't always know which brand, because consumers are very open right now to try new things and explore the shelf for new styles, etc. So we thought there was an opportunity to create a champion of the dark category, because we see that category isn't really dominated by a single player or a couple of players. It's really open. And the other thing we find is, while there's some very interesting flavor, there's not as much sessionability as the pale golden category. A lot of the beers are a little bit heavier. You may not consume as many in a session. So we thought we'd find inspiration from the German-Czech traditions of the long cold aging, because they also make dark beers and they're lagers. And that's what we've tried to do here. So we enlisted our former Czech brewmaster, who flew over every month, tweaking the style over 6 months, and in the hopes of bringing to the dark category a complex recipe with incredible sessionability.
How do you come,
drinkable dark, as you might say?
It's delicious, as we, to our listeners. If you want, go check out the YouTube page. We're actually having a glass of this, and cheers. Yes, it's phenomenal. How did you come up with the name?
Well, the name is funny because the Vaughn, which is of or from, is largely a tip of the hat to the German and Czech tradition of long cold aging, which gives our beer a very unique flavor profile. The Bugle is, we're always we were looking for inspiration in the early days of Canada. This country was making beers long before it was a nation. Beer has been made here for 400 years, as you can imagine. A lot of European immigrants coming over with beer recipes and a thirst for beer. And largely those beers had a bit of a darker color at the time, which is why the style. And we found in our research that one of the sounds that was so common and popular at the time was the bugle call. Keep in mind there was a lot of soldiers here trying to establish a domain, and they all that bugle would blow at 6 o'clock every day, and that was time for the soldiers to get back to their mess and have their 3 beers rationed. So you've got two, the tip of the hat to Steam Whistle as our sister brewery, in that you've got 2 noise-making devices that both signal time to stop what you're doing and drink beer. We couldn't resist the temptation.
I love it. When do you drink Steam Whistle or Von Bugle? What is there certain times with a meal, or is it just different, or whatever you?
Very, very, very much so. I mean, a lot of pairing is a very personal thing.
Sure.
I love pilsners with spicy food. That bitterness from a pilsner just cuts spice so deliciously. I actually enjoy Von Bugle with a cigar, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a cigar smoker. I'm going to try that. Yeah, for sure.
Those flavors really work well together.
So you talked about yourself and your partner having, the similar visions. Can I ask you, what is the long-term vision of, both Steam Whistle and Von Bugle?
Well, the long-term vision we set out, namely with Steam Whistle, was to create Canada's most respected premium beer.
Okay.
And we felt that if we could accomplish that, and that also meant distribution coast to coast, that we would have established a marketing platform then that would set us well up for export. We always said we'd never leave the country until you could get our beer coast to coast. If we go down to the States, for example, as sort of a Toronto's, hippest craft brewery, that's not a big marketing plan. If you go down as Canada's most respected premium beer, it's a whole different story, because outside of Canada, we're still viewed as a great brewing nation.
Right.
Even though 90% of the beer on shelves now is made with corn syrup and carbonated water, but that's a different story. And so we thought if we could achieve that, we'd be very well set up with a marketing platform that we could use as we go outside of the country and share one of Canada's great pilsners with the world.
I can't wait for that. Where does the marketing background come from? Is it from your parents with Upper Canada? How
marketing is an
interesting. Some
interesting.
people might have jumped already
Yeah.
and said, you know what, we are Toronto's hippest beer, and let's just go.
Yeah, there are those.
There are those, obviously.
Yeah.
But you guys have held
back. We've all spent a lot of time in the different brewing markets, and there's many examples of different Canadian breweries that have spread out, and you really need a strong platform. But more than anything, we wanted this country to have in its identity a premium beer that Canadians could be truly proud of, whether they're hosting visitors from outside the country or they're traveling and promoting one of their great products. So.
You spoke about the corn syrup, and I know you said it's a different story, but I do have to ask, what is the main ingredients in Steam Whistle and Von Bugle?
Well, Steam Whistle and Von Bugle, we adhere to the oldest purity standard in the world, the Bavarian Purity Law of 1516, which says you cannot use anything for making beer other than all natural ingredients like malt, hops, yeast, and water. So
that's
now you can use as many different varietal of hops as you want, as many different varietals of malt as you want, but corn syrup was not intended ever as a brewing ingredient, and it has been adopted for no other reason than it saves money.
And you guys have stuck to this, and
yeah. So what happens then is they're brewing a syrup that they can then dilute 50% the day they package with carbonated water.
Okay.
So then they're using the least amount of time in tank in their facility and getting the most out of it. But no ingredients are ever, water is not supposed to be added to beer after the brew house. That's called dilution.
Sure.
So for lack of a better term, you have emerging in the beer industry the very similar thing you have in the orange juice industry, where you have not from concentrate. And that's ultimately where we're going as craft brewers.
As I was doing a little bit of research before I came and sat down with you today, I saw you and your partner receive an award for Entrepreneur of the Year. At the end of it, I heard you say, there's some people who said that you wouldn't be able to do this. And that really stuck with me, because growing up, I kind of, as the listeners know now, I always say I punted school. It wasn't something that I really did well. But there's a lot of teachers along the way that also told me I wasn't going to amount to anything.
Oh yeah.
Is that a big drive for you, man?
DGD, man. Doubter's going to doubt.
Doubters going to doubt. I love that.
Without the doubters, I don't know. It depends on how you're wired, but those people who doubt you are really a huge catalyst for driving you with more energy to achieve your goal.
And has that driven you
If everyone's sitting around you saying, "Oh yeah, go for it, you can do it," there's not much drive there. I need to be told you can't do it.
So okay, I'm very similar in that sense. Obviously, Cam, sometimes it eats me alive. I think about them so much, right? Where it's like, I'm gonna actually just do this because I'm gonna prove you wrong.
Yeah, you don't want the sole purpose of everything we do, because you can go down some very strange paths in life, but if it's something you start as a conviction of something you want to do, then that's an extra fuel to do it.
What's some other 1 or 2 tips you can give to some entrepreneurs that just, haven't thrown their hat over the fence yet? They have an idea or...
Well, I think one of the more important ones is to have fun. This world and this society is getting increasingly complex by the minute, and people are very serious, and relax. Have fun, and obviously being in the beer industry, it's very natural for us to be able to support that
Right.
philosophy. We're not a library, so although not to say you can't have fun in a library, but
you can.
I just think people I think society can always benefit from a little more fun.
Well, I can obviously, the short amount of time I spent with you, man, it's quite easy to tell that you do have a lot of fun, and I guess a lot more of creativeness comes out of that, right? You're having fun, and it's your passion.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, when people are relaxed, the whole team is I think coming up with better ideas and also executing the ideas better.
I've been fortunate enough to take the tour at Steam Whistle downtown. Can you tell our listeners, how did that come about? Like, did you just know because you wanted to get people into the building? And
well, going back to our original desire, which was to create a Canada's community brewery in one of our national historic sites, breweries have always opened their doors to revelers who like the beer, want to discover the beer, want to go for a tour, want to go for a taste. And before the craft brewing revolution, it was a trend that was going the way of the dodo bird, because most of the large industrial breweries no longer allow the public into the facility to go for a tour.
Safety reasons or whatever, or just...
Well, that's the bullshit answer they'll give
Okay.
you, but that's just because they don't really want to see how industrialized beer is made.
Okay,
because it's
makes sense.
Not very sexy. I can still remember my grandma bragging about going on tours with Molson and Labatt's back in the day.
Right.
But that program's been canceled. But
So you guys just knew we got to get them in here. This is the way to do it.
absolutely.
So how do guys get there, and where is it? And for the listeners that don't know.
Well, the Roundhouse is right across the street from the CN Tower in the downtown core of, where Canada was built out from, or one of the places. We're now available coast to coast, but for tours, come down to the Roundhouse. You can get us at steamwhistle.ca. And Von Bugle, we just opened up our tap room about a week and a half ago, and you can come out here and be one of the early, you can say you're one of the first people to tour the facility. And we're at 249 Evans Avenue in Etobicoke.
Just so you know, Cam, we're going to share this like crazy. We want to get as many people as in here as possible,
Great.
as well as Steam Whistle. Thank you so much.
We'd love to
again.
host.
Thank you for the beer as well. I really appreciate it.
Right on. Thanks, Jas.
Thanks, Cam.
Pleasure
Take
to
care,
chat with
buddy.
you today.
All right.
Cheers.
Awesome, buddy. Thank
Right
you.
on.
What is
Cheers.